Be here now.
Ram Dass was born in 1931 as Richard Alpert. In 1967, he traveled to India, where he met his spiritual leader, Neem Karoli Baba. Under his guru's guidance, he studied yoga and meditation and received the name Ram Dass, which means servant of God. Ram Dass is co-founder and board member of the Seva Foundation, a without-profit organization dedicated to manifesting compassionate action to alleviate suffering in the world community. Ram Dass received a master's degree from Wesleyan College and a doctorate from Stanford University. He taught psychology at Stanford and the University of California, and taught and conducted research in the Department of Social Relations and the Graduate School of Education at Harvard University between 1958 and 1963. While at Harvard, Ram Dass did extensive research with psilocybin, LSD-25, and other psychedelic chemicals. Because of the controversial nature of this research, he was dismissed from Harvard in 1963, the first professor to be fired by Harvard in the 20th century. And now, Ram Dass.
Some years ago, I had an interesting dialogue with my father. This was back in the 60s, in the commune days, and I produced, or a group of us produced, a 6-record album of lectures and music and radio shows and so on. I had done 4 all-night radio shows on WBAI in New York. And this was called Love, Serve, Remember. And it was a 6-record album, and it had a beautiful photographic book with it, with stories in it and so on. And the whole thing we distributed for $4.50. Of course, the economy was different then, in the 60s. And it did very well, and my father looked at it and he said, "That's a very impressive piece of work." I said, "Thank you," because he didn't always agree with most of what I was doing. And he said, "You know, this thing is worth a lot more than $4.50. I said, "You're right." He said, "You know, you probably could charge $9 or $10 for this." I said, "You're right." He said, "Would the same number of people buy it?" I said, "Probably." He said, "Well, I don't understand." I said, "Well, it cost us $3.50 to produce, and there is a profit in it of $1. That seems reasonable." He says, "I don't understand." He said, "Are you against capitalism?" And I tried to figure out how I would talk to my father about this. And I said, "You're a lawyer. Last year, you tried a case for Uncle Henry, didn't you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Was it a hard case?" He says, "Damn right. I had to spend a lot of time at the law library." I said, "Did you win?" He says, "Yeah, I won." I said, "You know, you charge pretty good fees to your clients. I bet you charged them a nominal egg, a healthy fee for that." He says, "Don't be an idiot." He said, "It was Uncle Henry." I said, "That's my problem." I said, "If you can find somebody who isn't Uncle Henry, I'll rip them off. If you can find somebody who's them, I will charge them what the market will bear." You see, I was growing up at that moment in a culture that said, I want to live in a world of us, not in a world of them. And the way in which I priced my economics was based on the assumption that everybody was my relative, or everybody was us. And I was going to create a price structure that didn't create that feeling of themness. Now, let me just read you this. In order to play our role, we're often required to define people as us and them. This is very subtle. The question is, who is us and who is them? When we started out as tribes, the tribe is us. We find there's another tribe, and maybe we decide that because there's only one buffalo available, the other tribe becomes them, because we have to protect the buffalo meat for our own tribe. So it's us against them, and we share the buffalo among us, and we compete with them. In a competition paradigm in business, who you're competing against is them, and we in our company are us. But it doesn't stop there. If you're an administrator or an executive and you have to motivate the people in your company to get a certain level of productivity, to some extent you have to see your employees as them as well, playing to get the best out of them. And you say nice things about us, but you're thinking them. So now your employees are them, and you are us, meaning the administration. Of course, you as an executive are surrounded by peers who are waiting for your misstep because they're trained in the same competitive school that you were in. So at some level, your colleagues in your own company are a little bit them as well. Well, you say, at least I've got my family. They're us. But now your husband or wife is very upset because you're spending so much time in business. They don't understand how important this is. And because they don't understand or appreciate your predicament, you start to think of your family as them. Then within the family, of course, there's the issue of generations. The kids don't understand. They're a different generation. So the kids are them. My parents don't understand, and they become them. You slowly are getting cut off from the generations. And finally, after all, how can my husband or wife really understand because it's a different sex, and so your partner is them also. So I am left with only me in the category. I started out with us as the tribe, and now I've got us down to just me. And the extraordinary level of alienation, when you take it one step further, is that when you start to think about yourself as an object, you even become alienated from yourself. Even you are them, and you have ultimate and total alienation. So, in a way, this is our problem we're facing. That the myths in our culture, which are so much based on individuality, have led us down a path that has isolated us very profoundly from each other, because it has become acceptable, as following from really the Industrial Revolution a long way along, the myth of the individual succeeding, using whatever they need to do that, using whatever. And now as ecology becomes an issue, we're seeing that that's not quite an acceptable, that's kind of a dysfunctional cosmology now, but it wasn't before. So the myth, the mythic structure, which, like this type of thing that Joseph Campbell would point out, the hero figure, the role of the individual going to develop their own strengths and capacities, is a major trap, because it ends up leaving a person caught in separateness. Now, this is an interesting kind of quality of separateness. It's a separateness of the mind. It's in which you are thinking about other people because you're identified with your needs. And the interesting thing about identification with your own needs and desires is that it colors everything in your world in terms of what you perceive others to be, because you see them only in relationship to the satisfaction of that desire. I mean, if you're hungry, you see what's edible. If your car is breaking down, you notice service stations. If you are lustful, you see what's makeable. And in other words, you have made everybody around you into an object. And the cost of that is incredible, because the mind, when you have a desire and then you think about how to satisfy it, and you take somebody and make them, you think about them as an object to be manipulated to bring about the gratification of your desire, you separate yourself from them. And what gets starved in that process is both you and them. It's an incredibly starving process. What it does is it closes down the quality of the heart connection between human beings. And that is an extremely painful cutting off. Most of us don't have that much control over this, that these desires just take us over. I mean, I've watched myself in the most horrible and ghastly ways, the way it's worked, where I can be sitting so lovely and spacious and caring and open towards people, and then, say, lust will enter into me, as if it came from somewhere else, but it comes, it awakens, it arises, and suddenly my whole perceptual apparatus shifts. In the Hindu tradition, you'd say, I went into my second chakra. I went into the plane where suddenly I see everybody in one of three categories, either makeable, potentially makeable, a competitor, or irrelevant. Right? And I watch myself go from being this very open spiritual being to looking at everybody in this way, and then suddenly, to my horror, I am ready to use everything in the service of gratifying this desire, and I'll say terrible things like, won't you come up and see my holy pictures? So, and I'm horrified by at myself, saying, you didn't say that, did you? I mean, I can't believe that I was taken over by this desire system. And when we have these powerful desires like lust or the desire for power that comes out of inadequacy, of fear, feelings of loneliness, we will manipulate the people around us in order to get what we want, but in the process we treat them as objects, not as us, but as them. And those of you that have been subject to feelings of lust know that the difference between a lust and a love is that lust manipulates an object for the gratification of your own desires. And the minute that desire system is gratified, the other person is a literal stranger to you because you merely know them as an object. You've never let them in as a fellow being with you. Now, as we develop our identities, if I develop my identity as a teacher, I need you as an audience or students in order to legitimize my definition of myself. So I'm constantly looking to you, I'm manipulating you to get you to give me back something I need to reassure me I am who I think I am. And that's where the identification with my own separateness starts to make me use everybody around me to get that. And you can feel that in your own lives again and again and again. The way, if you feel yourself as a competent mother, you need your children to be a certain way to legitimize your role as a mother. And the minute you need somebody else to fulfill a model you have of yourself, you start to manipulate the other person. And don't think the other person doesn't feel manipulated. And then you're dealing with an interesting situation in which you're creating in other people around you the paranoia that feels that they feel that they're being used and exploited. Now, to just complete the problem we're facing, is that most of us create models about how we think life ought to be, like the woman who thinks her children, to be a good mother, she must her children must be a certain way. Like, my mother felt that her children should be clean and neat and be quiet, should be seen and not heard. And therefore, every time we were heard as well as seen, or every time we were dirty, we were a threat to her definition of herself. And as much as she loved us, what she loved us as was her child, not as us, but as her child. She didn't hear me. She only needed me to be what she needed me to be in order to feel adequate, because she felt very insecure as a human being. And I think that you can see how you do this in interpersonal relationships, of using people to fulfill your needs or your models and having expectations. If you really loved me, you would be who I need you to be in order to feel that I'm okay. That's a very convoluted process, and it's the process that most of us are living with most of the time. That's what's so bizarre. Okay, now let me give you another model about relationship, and let me leap out into some other place for a moment. I was invited to swim with these two dolphins named Joe and Rosie. It was a cold day in Redwood City at the Marine Land, and John Lilly, who was a friend of mine, was doing research with these two dolphins. And I was with a friend, and we went to the edge of this huge tank, and the dolphins were swimming around, and my friend was in the water, and it was a cold day, and I began to think, well, I'm a little old for this. Maybe I should think twice about doing this. But it was too late, so I got into the tank on the platform and then got into the water and was treading water. And these two dolphins went by me in a very strident way. And I suddenly realized they were bigger than I thought they were, and that this was their territory, not mine. That was the first thing I realized. And they went very close and very fast. And then one of them, Rosie, started to hover right here. She just stood what you wouldn't stand. You would, what would you do? You'd well, she wasn't floating. She was sort of hanging in there. And now my mind, here's what was happening. I was thinking, you know, all the time I said, I want to swim with the dolphin, because everybody wants to swim with the dolphins, don't they? Now suddenly I was swimming with the dolphins, and I thought, what do you do with a dolphin? I mean, nobody told me what to do. I mean, and suddenly my mind was, well, what shall I do? And what I wanted to do was touch it. But I thought, you can't just go and touch a dolphin. I mean, because I've fished for years, and you know, you don't touch fish. They don't let you just touch them. They swim away. So I reached out, very much anxious and feeling inadequate to the situation, and I touched the dolphin. The dolphin didn't move. It just stayed there. And so I ran my hand softly down its back, and it stayed there. And it had the most silky back that I had ever touched. It was like, it's about almost all water, and it's just liquid to touch, just incredibly soft and silky. And so I started to run my hand down its back, enjoying the sensual part of it. And I suddenly realized that the dolphin was right there. The dolphin knew I was doing it, and the dolphin was entering into a relationship with me, allowing me to touch its back, and it was just staying right there. And the intensity of that moment took me out of my mind. The intensity of the presence of us just being together, and the fact that that dolphin was allowing me this, it was like having a deer eat out of your hand. It just took me out of myself. And the minute my mind jumped out and I let go, the dolphin, Rosie, flipped around, and she came upright, and she pushed herself against me, insinuating herself towards me in a most sensual manner. And my mind had given up at that point, and I grabbed her, and I started to kiss her on the mouth, okay? And at this point, I started to get aroused. And I thought to myself, I mean, is this legal? I mean, you're allowed to do that? You know? I mean, you've got to understand, all the people are standing around the pool watching to see Ram Dass with the dolphins, and here I am making out with Rosie. I mean, this is... So my mind was just being blown bit by bit by bit. And then Rosie, after a little while, she compassionately swam around, and she came up under my arm. And I wanted to swim with her. So I took hold of her fin, and she went down, and then my hand slipped off her fin, and I floated back up. And I thought, well, see, I'm back in my mind now. I thought, well, I don't want to hurt her. And so she came back under my arm. So I held the fin a little tighter, and we went down, and I slipped off. And I thought what I really want to do is put my arm around her belly and hold her, but that's really coming on a little strong, you know. I mean, so about 3 or 4 times this happened, and finally I figured, well, look, I'll do it. If she doesn't like it, she'll let me know. And I grabbed her, and we started to swim wildly around the tank at great rate and very violently, and I thought it's bothering her, so I'll let go. Must be bothering her because it's so violent, and I let go and floated up, and she came right back in under my arm again. Thought, okay, you're asking for it, so I held her as tight as I could, and we started to swim wildly around the pool. And it was an ecstasy of intimacy with this other being. And after a little while, I thought, a thought came in. See, while it was happening, there's no thought. It's just this incredible process. And then a thought arises, and it says, look, Rosie, you're a dolphin, but I got to breathe, you know. The minute the thought arose in my mind, Rosie came to the surface, waited for me to get a breath, and then went back down again. And this went on for about 40 minutes, that Rosie would swim wildly, and every time I felt like I was exhausted and I needed a breath, Rosie would come up and wait for me. So once we came up, and people were taking pictures, and I got into this kind of hammy role of, you know, me and the dolphin, and I forgot to take a breath. And Rosie went under, and I thought, well, this is the moment of truth, because I don't have any air in my lungs. And it was only about 3 seconds, and Rosie turned and came right up again and waited for me to get a breath. And then we went on until finally I started to get very cold. My body was turning blue. I was shaking. It was a cold day. And Rosie came to the surface, shook me off, went and got Joe, and they both, with their noses, pushed me over to the edge of the tank, pushed me onto the holding platform, forced me out of the tank, and wouldn't let me back in. Okay, now, what is that relationship about? What kind of a quality of nonverbal and non-conceptual intunement did we get into that made that process so incredibly feeding and rich and loving and present? I mean, I didn't know Rosie. We hadn't talked about our histories. We didn't know anything about our social lives. We just suddenly were there together. And when you are cast into that relationship with another being, you begin to realize what you're losing most of the time in the way in which you are dealing with human relationships, in which you are mediating the way you are with people through your mind, because every time you think about a relationship, the thinking mind takes an object. You think about things. So you're always one thought away from where the action is. It's always just a little way away. So I'm talking now about the way in which the mind cuts us off from the heart, or the mind cuts us off from a certain way of being with another human being that feeds us. Because it's as if we have two clear, obvious mechanisms for being in the universe. One is through the mind that processes sense data and thoughts and relates to the world as object. And then there's this other quality of the heart. And we always have these expressions like, my heart goes out to you. And the quality of the heart is that it doesn't have boundaries. The quality of the heart is it loves without discrimination. It just loves. It has no boundaries. The mind is continually setting boundaries. This is me, this is not me. This is good, this is bad. The mind is constantly judging. The heart is not judging. The heart is just opening. It's boundaryless. So that the mind is actually afraid of the heart. That's what the interesting thing is, the battle that goes on in us. You're afraid of your own heart because your heart would give away the store, and the mind says, you know, the heart says, you need my car, you need my house, you need my life, take it. And the mind is saying, now, wait a minute. You got your health insurance to pay. Keep cool. Don't blow the whole scene. So the interesting question is, when and under what conditions can you meet people in such a way that you can keep your heart open without giving up your discriminative wisdom about how to be with another person. Here's an example. I'm on the board of an organization called the Sava Foundation, which is an experiment. A group of us came together in 1979 to see if we could all of us shared the common desire to help relieve suffering in the world. But we realized that we were very imperfect instruments of that. So the criteria we set was that we would join together in a service to relieve suffering, but we would use it as an exercise for us to grow so that we could become freer, thus better instruments of service, and we would also have fun doing it. That was the third criterion. And so one of the first project that we took on was world blindness, preventable and curable blindness. And the country of Nepal invited us in, and we went into Nepal under the umbrella of the World Health Organization originally, and then we became an NGO there. So we had a rotating chairman of the board status, and my turn came to be chairman of the board. And it was just at a time when we were about to build one of our hospitals in Nepal. And I suddenly found myself as the chairman of the board in Nepal, because we're a hands-on board, and I was meeting with the Minister of Health of Nepal, who works for the king. And it's a real monarchy. I mean, the king can say, off with your head, and that's it. So I was meeting with the Minister of Health, and we came together, and now I had been, for some years by that time, I had left academia, and I had been really a practicing communal hippie for a long time. And now here I was with my blue blazer and my red tie, and I was suddenly a representative of a foundation, and I had to keep my act together, and I had to make sure we got what we needed from the government. And he had a wish list, because when you're the third poorest country in the world and you meet somebody that's the head of a foundation from America, you know it's like meeting Santa Claus. And from my point of view, I needed him to let go of certain restrictions and so on. So I come in with my wish list, he comes in with his wish list. We sit down, we have tea, I have my entourage, he has his entourage. And I'm very nervous because I'm going to have to be very strong in this situation. And I'm busy being chairman of the board. And I'm busy seeing him, and he's got his Nepali dress on, he's the Minister of Health. And in passing, I happened to go by and just look into his eyes. And as I look into his eyes, what I experience is somebody looking back at me. I mean, he's right there. And he, in effect, is saying, I mean, it's as simple as he's just saying hello. And it's as if I said yesterday in the class I was teaching, it's as if you have a television receiver with a control dial right here by your eyes, and I was tuned to the channel where we were social roles, and then he was tuned to another channel where he was just a fellow soul. He was a fellow being looking out at me like, are you there? I'm here, far out. And what happened at that moment was that the plane of reality shifted for us. And at that moment, I saw the entire dialogue around hospital and bargaining and win and loss in the same way as I would play a game of Monopoly. And chairman of the board became the thimble, and Minister of Health became the top hat. Those of you that are familiar with that game will understand that. And we understood we had come together to play a game of life, really. But we were meeting behind the game. That was the key point. We were meeting behind the game. And once we recognized that, we started to go at our bargaining, and we fought very fiercely for what we wanted. But the profound impact of that meta meeting behind the level at which we were opponents was that the more we bargained, the more we came to appreciate each other, and the closer we became as friends. Now, can you hear what I'm saying? I want to get that in. The whole idea of two levels of consciousness. Like when you go out to play tennis with somebody, realize that you are going out to compete, but you both collaborated to go onto the court together to play the game. So there are two planes of reality. There's the plane of collaboration and there's the plane of competition. And we call that a good sport. Somebody that is not a good sport, one of those gets out of proportion to the other. Either way, if you're just there to collaborate, you'll give the game away. That's not good sportsmanship. If you're just there to win, you forget that you're collaborative and you start to get so attached to winning that you alienate the other person and you create a hell realm for the two of you. And we have a lot of sports models of both of those kinds of things. So when we're talking about relationship now, we're talking about not giving up the mind, but balancing the mind with the heart so that you get both of these things simultaneously going in relationships. It's interesting that when you go out into the woods and you look at trees, you appreciate trees. You appreciate an oak and an elm and a pine. And a gnarled tree is a gnarled tree, and a straight tree is a straight tree, and a big tree. I mean, if you're in the lumber business, it's different, but for most of us, we're not. And so you're just looking at a tree and enjoying the tree for itself. And you're appreciating the tree. You're appreciating its uniqueness. But you notice when you come near humans how it shifts. You go into your judging mode. You say better, worse, older, younger, should be this, should be that. And you went from appreciation to judging. And part of the ability to be with other human beings is the ability to shift ground back into appreciation rather than judging. To look at another human being, like look at your child, or look at your colleague, or look at your employee, and appreciate their human predicament. Like Al Hunt, yesterday we were on a program together, and he said an interesting thing that I disagreed with the way he said it. He said, we were talking about, he was talking about Jesse Helms. And he doesn't like Jesse Helms. And he said, Jesse Helms is an evil man. And I will tell him when I see him, I haven't said this to him yet, but I think it would have been better, and I'd like him to reconsider whether he'd be willing to say, Jesse Helms is a being who does evil acts. Because that's a very critical distinction. Because the minute you identify somebody with their acts, when you find their acts reprehensible, you reject them. And there is a quote in the poet, by the poet Kabir, that says, do what you do with another human being, but never put them out of your heart. Never close your heart down to them. I watched in myself how hard that is to learn. In the last administration, I had considerable difficulty with Caspar Weinberger. I just had difficulty with some of his policy. And so I took a picture of Caspar, and I put it on my table with all my holy pictures. And I had the Buddha, and I had Christ, and I had all the Indian saints, and I had all these beings, and I had Caspar Weinberger there. And in the morning, I'd come in, and I'd sit down, and I'd light my incense, and I'd do my thing, and I'd say, good morning, Christ, and good morning, Buddha, and hello, Ramana Maharshi, and then, hello, Caspar. And I could see how far away I was from being able to keep my heart open to this being, even though I didn't like his acts. It was like Gandhi saying, the British must leave India, but I want them to leave as friends. I want to keep the us quality going, even though in the game they must move out. And that is really such an incredible art form in human relations. The ability to keep the quality of us going, even as you do a dance. In marriages that I'm often, one of my sidelights is I perform marriages. Sort of strangely. And one of the things about a marriage is that two people come together, and if you can imagine a triangle, they come together as male, female, partnership, and through that process of marriage, when they are doing this with really dedication to the process of relationship, they find the pinnacle, they find the one behind the two. They find the place that's not only us, it's one, it's I. And then they dance as two, so that they are both, they are the one and then they are the two. And there is a tension between those two things. They are one as two and two moving towards one. The two are constantly looking, like if you take two people and have them face each other, and you have somebody look at the point between the eyes of the other person and just sit there with another person. What you'll see is if you just sit there for, say, 20 minutes with another person looking into the point between their eyes, you're not looking into their eyes. It's not a social experiment. You're looking between their eyes. What you'll see is your mind creating realities about that person. All of your judgments will go in about beauty, about psychological things. Then you'll kind of get tired of those. Then things will change. And after a while, you'll begin to see the face changing a lot as your mind keeps changing. Because as your mind changes, the reality around it changes. If you keep right on looking, pretty soon the whole thing will become liquid, and it will actually, the other person just disappears. That's all you're left with is this point right there, and the face itself disappears. And there is a way of using a process of relationship to come to the place where the two start to just become awareness. Like, take this room at this moment. What is it that makes us us? I mean, there's plenty that makes you and I them to each other. Some are men, some are women, some old, some young, some from Europe, some from Africa, etc. I'm lecturing your audience, but look at the things that are us. Us, we're all at a YPO university. Us, the sunlight is streaming in. We're all experiencing that. There are a whole realm of things that are usness. For us, it's 20 minutes of 11 for all of us. There are qualities that bring us together. Where do we focus on the usness and where do we focus on the themness? And as you develop the qualities, as you acknowledge the parts of us, like in a marriage, what happens is, behind the two, when you've been with somebody for many years, you know all their stories, you know all their routines, you know how they think, you know what they're going to say, and they know all your routines too. And in a way, you're sharing a body of knowledge that's brought you into oneness, in which, oh, okay, it's you that does that. You're the one that tells the old fishing story. You're the one that puts the garbage out, and so on. Let me read you, I want to take you to one more level, and then we'll talk together. This is a poem by a Vietnamese monk called Thich Nhat, by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh. Have any of you ever heard of him? Okay. Extraordinarily advanced Buddhist teacher. And this is the voice of the part of us that merges with other beings. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look at me. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird whose wings are still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I will arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly, metamorphizing on the surface of the river. I am also the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond. I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. I am also the merchant of arms, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. I am also the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills up all the four oceans. Please call me by my correct names, so that I can hear at the same time all my cries and my laughs, so that I can see that my joy and pain are but one. Please call me by my correct names, so that I can become awake, so that the door of my heart be left open, the door of compassion. As long as you are identified with yourself as a separate entity, then you are always in relationship with them, with objects. The minute you cultivate that part of you that is connected, that is part of the web of things in which we are us, then another quality comes into human relationships. And this is the quality, of course, that you recognize, the quality of love, of coming into love with people. Because all of the ways in which we are separate are at some level rooted in fear. And really the dialogue in humanity is the dialogue, one way of characterizing the dialogue is the dialogue between fear and love. And let me tell you one story. I had a 1938 Buick limousine at one point. It was a beautiful, big black limousine with white side tires on it, and I was very proud of this car. It was in the 60s sometime. And I was driving it from Boston to California. And I was going along the New York Thruway, and I had come back from India, and I was driving, this car weighed 6,000 pounds, 3 tons. Very heavy car. It was like driving a tank. It was very, you just drove all day. And I had one leg folded under me, and I was driving along, and I had my beads, and I was repeating the names of God. And the name I had chosen for that moment, I mean, sometimes I used any number of names, Allah or Om or Ram or whatever. But in this case, I chose the name Krishna. And Krishna is one of the forms of the Hindu gods at one of the yugas or time periods. And Krishna was this being of blue radiance, presented as blue, and very beautiful being. And Krishna was a very playful type of, he was, in his time, he was a cow herdsman. And he used to make love to all the milkmaids. And he was always a rascal. When they go bathing, he'd hide their saris, and he'd cause immense troubles of trouble. I mean, we in the West don't have gods that are as much fun as in Hinduism, they got a lot of fun gods. So I was enjoying Krishna, and I was just going, Krishna, Krishna, and that song that many of you know from airports, that is, fortunately, and that was coming from a slightly different place, but it was still that, the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And I was singing that, and I'd been singing for maybe 4 hours. And I was getting myself into a state where I kept just, I kept just enough consciousness on this plane to keep the car moving down the road. I kept the steering wheel working, but in my realm, I was in the realm of Krishna. It's interesting, if you go to Vrindavan, which is one of the holy cities in India, you find that many of the people are living in the realm where Krishna, you go to the milk salesman, and his eyes are like this because he sees Krishna, and you're busy buying milk, you know? I mean, it's just two different levels of reality. He's just tuned differently. So I was doing Hare Krishna. I was thinking of this beautiful blue cow herdsman and all of his stories, and I was going deeper and deeper into my love of Krishna. And I suddenly became aware of a blue light in my mirror, and a kind of a undulating blue light. And I had enough on this plane to recognize that this was a state trooper. So I pulled my car over, and he came up to the window, and he said, may I see your license and registration, please? He said, I said, what's the problem, officer? He said, you're going too slow. See, because I was only going 45, and it was minimum was 50, I guess. Now, you've got to understand what state of my consciousness was in at that point, because what I saw was that Krishna had come to give me darshan. He had come to give me an audience. He had come to present himself, and he came in the form of a state trooper, all right? Because when I got into that realm, how would you know? I mean, because Christ came as a carpenter. Why wouldn't Krishna, how would Krishna come if he came in, you know, on the New York Thruway? Why not as a state trooper? And this guy came with blue light, and I was really, so I would have not only given him my license and registration, I would have given him anything, you know, and I gave him the license and registration, but I looked at him with just incredible love. Now, state troopers, it's interesting. See, in that role, I mean, when they're not in their uniform, it's another thing, but in that role, hardly anybody looks at them with love at that moment. So he took the license and registration, and he went back, and he called home and did whatever you do, and then he came and he walked around the car, and then he came up to me and he looked inside and he saw a box in the seat. He said, what's in that? And I knew what was in his mind, and I said, they're mints. Would you like one? And all the time, I am just, this is God that has come to be with me, and I just want to keep him there as long as I possibly can. I mean, this is who he thinks he is. That's his problem, but who he is for me is God, you know? So, now what happens is absolutely fascinating at this moment. He says, well, you were going too slowly, and if you want to do that, you better go on this, you know, the parallel road and not on the thruway. I said, yes, officer. And then he gives me back the license and registration, and the interesting thing is he doesn't want to leave at that moment because he's felt that thing. He's felt that feeling that has been of my feeling towards him. Just in this very gentle feeling of presence, of love. So he says to me, great car you've got here, see? Because there are certain things that men can talk about that are acceptable, you know, under those conditions. So then I get out and we sort of spit and we kick the tires and we talk about straight eights and, you know, slant sixes and how they don't make them like they used to, and we, you know, do all that stuff. And then we run out of that, you see. And I'm enjoying, I mean, he's Krishna. I'll take him whatever. He can talk about anything he wants. What difference does it make to me? And so finally he finishes and he says, now we've run out of things we can do. At this moment, he's either got to throw off the veil and say, I'm Krishna, because he's got nothing else to do as a state trooper. I mean, there's no other roles we have available to us. So he says, well, be gone with you. I said, all right, that sounded strange. So I got in my car, and he walked back to his cruiser, and I started to drive away, and I looked in the mirror, and he was waving at me. And I thought, oh, come on, state troopers don't wave, you know. He was like giving himself away. I sort of knew he just blew his cover. So what I learned from situations like that, and from what has happened in my own life, was that when I was capable of looking at another human being in a way that I could appreciate their beauty as a human being, just appreciate them. I mean, oftentimes we are so interactive with people, we're busy reacting to each other. But if you sit back in a corner and just look at another human being, like sit in the lobby and just watch people and appreciate the incredible beauty of the human condition, of each person that has taken birth, like a soul has taken birth, and is attempting to live with light, is attempting to be beautiful, is attempting to have joy in their life and happiness. Beings don't want to create suffering inherently. And you just look at the struggle and what they go through and how much pain, and you can see the pain in the muscles of their face and in their eyes. And you just look and you see just what a courageous existence it is for a being to be a human. And you look at the human with such compassion and such love and such beauty, just in the generic sense of human, and then appreciate each one's uniqueness in the same way you would appreciate pine trees and oak trees and elm trees. And then notice what happens in your relationships with people. Because if there is one thing that a person needs from another human being, it's to be appreciated. It's to be listened to. It's to be heard. To be appreciated just as you are, not as I would make you. I work about half of my time working with people that have AIDS or cancer as they're dying. And I hold them as they're dying, and I talk with them, and I'm with them. Now, and I'll deal with this more tomorrow in the How Can I Help section. But when I meet such a being, they have a certain symbolic value in my world. They are a dying person with AIDS. And I have a certain symbolic value. I'm a person who's come to help them die. If we stay at that level, if I stay in my role and they stay in their role, we stay separated from one another. And the relationship can be very kind, but it doesn't feed either one of us. And you will see that people who do helping to other human beings, who stay in their role of helper, ultimately burn out. They burn out because they're not being fed by the interaction. And what I realized at some point was that what was required was that I had to open my heart to this person and go behind the roles that we were both caught in and see beyond. Instead of like when Al identifies Jesse Helms with his actions, if I identify this being with his AIDS, I am trapping him in being somebody with AIDS. Now, he is somebody with AIDS, but beyond that, he's a being. And when I can find the place in myself that is my being, that is not the person helping, but just the being, then I can meet him as being to being. And the minute we do that, our hearts and our appreciations open to one another. And then the aids and the helping start to become ground instead of figure. And suddenly we are both being fed by the love of our presence together in the same way the state trooper and I were being fed by being together. And part of the work, and I'll talk about that tomorrow, is the way in which we deal with suffering in other human beings. Now, in the course of life, you end up with a lot of different people you have to be with. Some of them are givens, like relatives, parents, children, in-laws, etc. And some of them are, great setting. Some of them are, you got ooh yet to go through. What happened to ooh? They left. Some of them are givens, and some of them are what are called acquired. They're called friends, or people you deal with, associates. I mean, a boss is a given, unless you quit your job, but you have that choice. But a father isn't a given because you can't trade them in. So once you understand that the way in which relationships are going to feed you is your capacity to not get caught in the symbolic identity of each other. And I mean symbolic identity like father, son, daughter, person with AIDS, beautiful, ugly, old, young, all of these identities. If you get caught in them, we get, like if it's father and son, we get reactive. Son does something, it elicits fatherness. Father does something, it elicits sonness. And we keep as objects to each other. If we can meet behind father and sonness, as a you here, I'm here, we're fellow human beings, well, what do we do today? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll be your father, okay, I'll be the son. I mean, it turns into monopoly. Now, that sounds bizarre. You say, but I really am his father. Well, you are and you aren't. You happen to, at this moment in time and space, be in a biological relationship with this other human being that is labeled father. But behind that, you are a being, and that is a being. And you have to listen to that being carefully, because that being has their own story. They have their own genetics. They have their own, what in the East is called karmic predicament. And it's extremely hard to do that, because if you're identified with fatherness, you need your son to be a certain way in order for you to be an adequate father. So our job is continually to get out of our roles. Like I was on the funicular the other day, and Helmut Schmidt was standing next to me. And I was aware how powerful his symbolic identity was, that it was very hard for me just to be a person on the funicular with him, because he was so much Chancellor Schmidt. And I couldn't let go of the symbolic power. And it's the same thing. And like I've hung out with models, for example, women who are culturally defined as very beautiful, and they appear on Queen magazine and Vogue and so on. And when I spend time with them as human beings, I experience the incredible isolation they feel, because their symbolic value is so powerful that nobody can be with them as behind it. It's so powerful, it intervenes in all relationships. Here's an example. I was teaching a course with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. We teach courses on dying. And there was a nurse there, and she was 34. She had, I think, 3 children. She had cancer since her childhood, and she had had something in the order of, I don't know, well over 40 operations by this time. And she was a nurse with 3 children. And so she spent a lot of time in a hospital bed as well as a nurse nursing in a hospital. And she said, what would you feel if you came to visit me in the hospital? What would you feel? And then people called out things, and somebody said, I'd feel angry at God for doing this to you. I would feel pity. I would feel the pain of your situation. And the list went on, and there was not one response. She said, notice in all of these, you are all busy to responding to the fact that I am a 33-year-old woman with 3 children that has cancer. Nobody was responding to me. Can you hear that? Can you hear the difference between the role she was in and the identity of the being back in there? And she said, I felt tremendously isolated in that hospital because nobody was with me. Everybody was with their projections of the person who was sick in that way. Does that come through? Do you understand the issue? Because it's a really interesting one. And our ability to get out of that kind of, yeah.
How would you have responded to her as a person?
I think I would have, what I do when I walk into a room with somebody that's very ill, I sit down and I sit there and I see the predicament and I see my predicament, and then I am with the person and I say, hello. Hi, here we are together. And what we are we're 2 beings, and you have your storyline and I have mine. And we're meeting through our storylines to be together at this moment. And my ability to meet you behind your drama gives you the freedom to not be identified with your drama totally, which keeps trapping you in a finiteness that's strangling you. Can you hear what I'm saying? It's a good question. So when you are with people, you're with people in whom most of the time there are roles that you've entered into, and then you get trapped in the roles, and the roles both form an efficient way of being together, but they also separate you from each other. You end up seeing the other person as, oh, that's Harry, he's always this way. Now, the fact of the matter is, who you and I are is a tremendously complex set of levels of reality. I mean, you know yourself, when you come down to breakfast every morning, you're a different person many mornings than you are other mornings. But you'll notice that when you come into the relationship with people you know, how their expectations of who you are gets you to conspire to enter into that, and you push the rest of you aside. You may have just come out of a dream in which you were present with the Holy Spirit, and then you come down and somebody says, do you want bacon with your eggs or not? And that's so irrelevant. But if you say, oh, God is one, it's, are you sick? See? I mean, you don't have any right to not be. And the bizarre way in which our human relationships for efficiency, we enter into these conspiracies. I'll make believe you are who you think you are, if you will make believe I am who I think I am. And we say, well, that's efficient. I know her, she's Doris. And I know him, he's Sam. And Sam is Sam, and Doris is Doris. And all the parts of Sam, it's like cookie cutting. When you cut the cookie and then all the stuff around it you push away, all the stuff that doesn't fit into my model of Dorisness becomes irrelevant in you. So that when you're with me, I'm only getting one little facet of who you are because my mind only lets that in. And the interesting thing is, what is it like to be with another human being where you don't impose models on each other of who everybody is all the time, so you listen afresh to hear who you're meeting and allow another person to change? I mean, this happens when parents deal with teenagers. I mean, a teenager is one person, and then suddenly the endocrine system starts to become activated, and they're another person. And it's very hard for the parent to recognize that this is the same human being. They just keep forcing the child back into the mold. You always did this before. Why aren't you doing it? And the person's a different person. So in our relationships with each other, we begin to see how much we get trapped in the kinds of things that make us into objects for each other instead of subject. And we start to see this is a kind of a curriculum for us to break through the subject-object relationship with another human being. Now, sometimes, if you're lucky, you find another human being who wants to break through it with you. And that, in the spiritual tradition, is called the satsang or the sangha. It's the community of beings who say, let's be together in order to awaken out of the illusion of our separateness. That's what a sangha is about. It's a spiritual community. And relationships where you're lucky enough to have a partner that says, let's use our relationship in order to awaken. And let's use it in order to get free of the traps of our own minds so that we can really be together in truth, behind the dramas, behind the symbology, so we can be together as the spirit behind the form. It's an incredibly exciting adventure for human relationships. It's the most profound yoga that I know of, and it's also the hardest one. Because what it does is it keeps the relationship right on the fine line between chaos and cosmos. It's not a secure thing. You can't settle in and say, well, you're always this way, because the person may not be that. And one of the criteria for being in a relationship in which you are trying to use it to awaken is the simple rule is the rule of truth. And truth is heavy to deal with in human relationships. And to sit down with another human being and share truth. Now, I don't mean truth in the beating the person over the head. See, and in most contracts between human beings, truth is not required. What is required is you don't say things that will hurt them. You don't say things that will upset them. You allow them to be who they are. Now, there is a way in which I say, look, I am who I am, but let's enter into this contract in which we will be straight with each other. And I've sat with people, and I'll tell you how scary and far out it can get. You just sit with somebody for about 5 hours, and you face them. And I've done this with husbands and wives and all kinds of people. And you just take turns asking, if there is anything you can bring to mind that would be difficult or uncomfortable to share with me, share it. Now, just feel the pain of that thought even. Think of what that brings to mind, just the thought of it. I mean, I'm not going to tell her that. Oh, my God, no, because what it does is just that question brings forth all the stuff in your mind that you wouldn't share with another human being. Because everybody's got that stuff. Now, it's interesting. It is not the stuff itself. It is the fear of sharing it that's what cuts you off from another human being. Because when I have a thought that I can't tell you, what happens is a little part of my mind makes you object. It keeps you at a distance from me. And I find after a while that if I really want to enter into a relationship of living truth, I can't afford the lie any longer. It's costing more. It makes, because every one of those lies deadens the relationship. It just takes a little bit of it and it makes it a little deader, a little deader, a little deader, because it's the part where the other person's object. And I've watched relationships where people start to talk and where people start to share this stuff. And I mean, I was a therapist for years, so I've heard all the stuff. I mean, what are you going to tell somebody? I masturbate, I had sex with somebody else, I want to kill you, I'm thinking of eating you alive, I don't know. I mean, I pick my nose, I have these weird sexual things. What could it be? It's stuff. It's stuff. Yes?
You're talking about truth or honesty, or is it one and the same? Is that very difficult with the word truth?
Well,
I'll read the question.
the question is, are we talking about truth or honesty?
I'm honest with you because I'm open with you. Because what is truth?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think I would rather say, let us be honest with one another, all right? But in a way, we are approaching a truthful relationship because we are cutting through the conceptual structures that are keeping us from the being together in truth, which is the non-conceptual way of being together. It's why Gandhi's life autobiography was called Experiments with Truth. It was that experiment of learning how to move towards truth by honesty as a vehicle. But by sharing, but sharing honestly. Now, when you look around at your relationships, you will see how few of your relationships have this contractual agreement. The contractual agreement is, I won't bug you, you don't bug me. I have my privacy, you have your privacy. It's all wonderful, it works, it's efficient, but you end up alone. And the interesting question is, if you're going to use relationships to break out of the alienated state, it is scary business, but the reward of it is incredible. Because each thing, when you enter into a contract with somebody that says, look, let's wake up, let's really attempt to be honest with one another and to come as clear as we can and to share as much as we can. At first, it's very scary, and the minute the stuff comes into conceptual form, now, it isn't always that way. Sometimes it's too scary. I had a couple which they came to me and they said, we would like you to marry us. And I said, well, I really only like to marry people who want to enter into a relationship where they want to awaken together. Oh, we want to awaken together. I said, well, awakening together is pretty tricky because you have to be honest with one another. Oh, we want to be honest with each other. I said, well, in being honest with each other, you have to share the things you might not want to share. Oh, we want to do that. And she was very adamant she wanted to do that. I said, all right, why don't we just try a little experiment? Why don't we just face each other? And I said to him, if there's anything that you can say that you wouldn't say, say it, you know, anything be different. He says, well, when you were out of town last year, Carol, your best friend, came over, and one thing led to another, and we had oral sex. She said, you bastard. And she turned him off so fast, I don't think I can forgive you. You've destroyed the fabric of our relationship. What he had destroyed, see, it was interesting because the fact that he had done that with her created in him a place in his mind in which she became an object, this partner, because this is something he couldn't tell her, so she was out there. They were living with that, which was like, it was like a poison in the relationship. And the minute he brought that poison out, she said, I can't live in this situation. I said, well, you have three choices. He's an absolute rat, you can leave him. You can do what often people do, which is even more horrible. You can say, well, I'll try to forgive you. Which means that for the rest of your life, you can say every time, well, I tried to forgive you, but it's very hard. You know, you can hold it over them for the rest of your life. Or you can say, look, we're human, we all blow it, what the hell, here we are, let's go. Okay, see? And it's an interesting one, because in truth, what happened was that she said, oh, I want the third, I'm going to let go completely. And she didn't, and a year later, they got divorced. As you begin to see where you're going with human relationships, and you want to awaken out of your own separateness and your own isolation, to the extent you have a choice, you begin to look for people to be around where you have some choice. You intend to be with people that will want to enter into some contract to awaken through truth and sharing. And this can be, I mean, like the Seva Foundation is a very interesting experiment. I know some of you are on boards of directors. Our board is a very interesting board. There are 18 of us on the board. This is made up of doctors and professors and all kinds of people. Some from India, some from the States. Our board meeting goes for, the summer board meeting goes for 7 days. The first 2 days, the first day is a day of meditation in which we all quiet down, get here. And we do some practices, some meditative practices. Then we start the process of circle sharing the next day. We start going around the circle, each person bringing everybody up to date about what's happening in their life. My children, what's happened in my family, what's happened in my work, etc. Then we start going around deeper. What are the things that are keeping me stuck at this moment? Oh, then it gets interesting. Then as we go around the circle, what is it about anybody else in this group that is catching me? See, like, for example, we had a committee together, but you didn't ever call a meeting, and you really screwed up that committee. Do I tell you that, or don't I tell you that, right? Or, you know, you always come off sort of half-cocked. You don't really know what you're talking about. Or you went to Guatemala, and then you made a statement in the press that has caused some real problems for us. And maybe we don't think we should trust you to go to Guatemala. These are our board, our fellow board members. And we begin to see that for us to get straight with each other so that that board will have the power of a center of a powerful organization, we are setting the criteria that we're going to be straight and clear with each other. Now, there are very few boards that any of you have ever been on that have demanded that kind of criteria. Everybody comes in as an expert, everybody knows, everybody leaves each other's territory alone, and the result is you come to a board meeting, you serve, you feel like you're a good guy, and you go away, but you didn't get fed by the process. We come out of those meetings much more vibrant and alive, and we take breaks to play volleyball every few hours so we won't get lost in the shuffle, and then we shift our game of who we are at that moment. That kind of an experiment of an intentional community that comes together in order to awaken. See, we're coming together in order to awaken through doing service. Okay. It's time to stop? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was... Sorry, I blew it again. Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Just be here now.